Welcome back to W Decanted. Luke Crowley Holland here. In this episode we caught up with Dr. Rachel Barrie as part of Whiskeria's Spring 2026 Industry Insider. Dr. Barrie is one of the biggest names in the Scottish whisky industry. They are Master Blender of the Glendronach, Glenglassaugh and the Benriach. It's a wonderful and wide-ranging chat, and you can find each of these brands online and in store at the Whisky Shop, with select members pay less savings for W Club Rewards members. Enjoy the show. Going. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on to the W Club Decanted podcast. It's fantastic to have you on. Before we jump into talking about your career right now and all things at Brown-Forman, could you maybe tell us a bit about your journey up to this point? How you got into whiskey?
Oh yes, it's been a wonderful journey. Very interesting journey. So started off with Scottish Whisky Research Institute, got employed by the late great Dr. Jim Swan, who was my mentor and guru, and obviously, highly regarded by the whisky community. Researching distillation, maturation. Obviously I did chemistry, I studied chemistry, so it was a great way to bring kind of science together with my hobby and whiskey appreciation, and that really set the scene for the next 31 years after that. So I was there for 3 years, and then I got the job at Glenmorangie as at that point I think I was quality lab manager. And I did that for 3 years, had my first son, came back, and then straight into product development, so straight back into research and innovation. And then 2003 was made Master Blender, which was a wonderful accolade and really opened the doors for me to kind of advance. I was there till end of 2010, beginning of 2011, and then I got a tap on the shoulder, and it was to Bowmore, Suntory. Worked as Master Blended there for 6.5 years with Bowmore, Glengarioch and Toshin, and latterly Lafroig and Ardmore. And then I got another tap on the shoulder and felt like going home because I'm from Aberdeenshire, and Brown-Forman, the three malts, Glendronach, Benriach and Glenglassaugh, are all in the northeast of Scotland where I was brought up. So it was very fitting, I hate to say end of my career, final chapter in my career perhaps, going to Brown-Forman and working with 3 distilleries close to home.
Yeah, wow. No, it does sound interesting, and you've touched on it there. It's a really kind of broad portfolio you're working with, from kind of Glendronach, Glenglassaugh, and Benriach. How do you find managing three kind of brands that all have kind of similarities, but also obviously their own distinct elements?
I mean, it's fantastic because we've got distilleries from the Ben with Benriach, which is very elevated Speyside malt, to the Glen deep in the Valley of Forg with Glendronach, to Glenglassaugh, our coastal malt. So they're all very unique and all in a very small area, only 30 to 40 miles between each distillery in a triangle in the Trinity, in the northeast. And their characters could not be more different. So for me, it's variety is the spice of life. I always find working with I've got 3 sons. I've worked for 3 whiskey companies, and working for 3 distilleries for me is the sweet spot because there's enough variety. You can nurture them, bring out the best in each one, but it's not so many as you kind of dilute your ability to nurture them to be the best they can be. So yeah, it's it's a wonderful opportunity actually. It's because they're all different, sherry cask mastery to this, the most the delicacy of Speyside with Benriach to the influence of the coast with Glenglassaugh.
Yeah, I mean that brings us on to a really interesting point that I wanted to bring up in terms of your role and day to day managing. How is your time divided between the three? What's kind of a day or a week in the life of Rachel look like?
Oh gosh, there's no typical day because, well, 25% of the time, so that's probably around 12 weeks of the year, if you think about holidays as well, I'm traveling the world. So that's 12 weeks when I'm obviously not at the bench, but I am appreciating whiskey with consumers and customers around the world. So actually in the next 2 weeks now, I'm going to the USA. Then I'm coming back for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to India for the first time. So that's 25% of my role. I will be out and about. The other 75% is a little bit more structured, I suppose, in some ways. So normally do, sensory assessment, team meetings, in the morning, set the scene for the day, and try and do as much nosing as possible early on. And then, it's into obviously lots of meetings to do with strategy, to do with wood, supply chain. The job of a master blender or whiskey maker is very much you're almost like at the center of a spider's web, a center of the web. Is it the World Wide Web? Perhaps. But you're interacting with people from the start of the process. So distillery managers, right through to the warehouse managers and the wood supply coming in, to the vatting and the bottling strategy to make sure that you can deliver what you're going to deliver. So I have conversations with these people almost every day. And more when there's a challenge, because there's always challenges in the supply chain, which is wonderful. It could be a really good problem to have when you've got more demand than supply, of course. And then onto the marketing piece. So I speak to somebody from marketing again every day. There's somebody from the marketing team I'll be speaking to. Write copy or to discuss innovation and brand positioning or whatever. And then, of course, meetings with the markets. There might be a private client in Singapore or whatever wanting to bottle a specific cask type and style that they're really into. And then I might have to go and dive into that for a bit and find something that fits the bill that, can take quite a bit of time. So that's the kind of spread, I would say. And there's probably a lot more besides. So yeah, on any one day, I'm going to be interacting with people from the start to the end of the process and nosing and deciding how best to use our whiskey stocks and to create the expressions of the future.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, on the bit you mentioned at the start, the 25% that you spend traveling. I mean, obviously, there's lots of benefits to use a company and use a brand to that side of things. But for your for the other 75% of your job, do you find that kind of customer interaction, be that kind of either other businesses, of importers, or like literally customers who you might meet at an event you were doing, let's say with the whiskey shop? Do you find that influences your the other side of your role?
Oh, hugely. It just adds richness to the multitudes that you pick up that inform flavor or inspire you, or it could be a specific culture or particular aroma. I suppose it's the rich layers of travel are very inspirational for anyone and very enriching in your life. And of course, you bring that with you back to the bench or back to the distillery and what you make. There's always something. I could be at a whiskey show in Shanghai, meeting some people who are saying, "Oh, these really interesting yellow wine casks." would you like to know is what we're doing with this? Or, you know, you always get the chance to, you know, sometimes meet competitors as well out in market, which is always interesting. It's always good chance to, at whisky shows, get a chance to try other competitors' whiskies as well. And yeah, it's just, you know, it's all part of the richness, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's great fun as well. It's great fun. It just gets more fun as, you know, I find as I'm getting older, it's more and more fun because, you know, you do what you love and that's it, you know. And you want to help where you can in markets and share the love, you know, share the love of whiskey.
Mm-hmm. And kind of back to the other 75%. When you're kind of assessing a sample or kind of thinking about a release, in terms of the first nose or the first sip, how much what's that kind of process involved? What's the kind of, how much impression can you get from kind of meeting samples when they're young and how they're going to mature? I'm kind of waffling here, but I'm sure you get the meaning of my question.
Oh, so it's during the maturation process as opposed to the final
or
product?
Either or.
Okay, because, you know, it can be, because obviously when it's during the maturation process, you know, I've got a very, very simple scale of red, amber, green when I'm nosing casks, and you know, you can tell at each sniff, obviously, just from 90% of the experience of the tasting experience actually comes from aroma. So you can tell pretty quickly, oh yes, that's great. That's not quite ready yet, might be ready in 6 months, or oh, that one's maybe a red. Oh, that means, yeah, I probably need to transfer that into another cask, for example. So these decisions are mostly made when it's during maturation on aroma. In terms of developing whiskies, obviously the first sip is critical for the consumer, so you have to put yourself in the consumer's mind and go, right, okay, when they taste this, you just want it to be, you know, harmonious, balanced. So you can tell the first sip, absolutely. If, you know, it's very holistic the way I talk about it, because it has to be integrated, I suppose. Integration is key. Integration of flavor for me is the most important thing. If it's kind of spiking about and punching you about in your palate, you know, I'm like, no, this is no good, you know. So I can tell that very quickly at the first sip. If it's got viscosity in body and is harmonious and plays a symphony on your palate and has a lovely finish, absolutely you can tell, wow, that's perfect, that's really good. So at first sip, of course, you can tell because of, in my opinion, because of the balance that you perceive. You know, you can pick things up. I mean, there is the alcohol burn. Obviously, we do tend to, for scientific reasons, we reduce down to 20% alcohol to compare like with like. But when it's, you know, the consumer, representing the consumer getting the bottle, you are literally taking a first sip and making sure that that is, you know, telling the story and it's perfectly balanced.
Mm-hmm. No, fascinating. And I suppose in terms of, you mentioned at the start, was it 31 years in the kind of industry?
No, 34.
34. My apologies. Although,
well, the first 3 were science, but still for the Scotch whisky industry.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
The in that time, have you noticed any kind of real trends and changes that you find interesting?
Do you know, that's a really interesting question, because of course there have been changes. It's been a long time, and you know, when I started out, there was it was mostly focused on blends. Actually, there was still. I mean, it was the 90s, so some malts had started to grow more in the 80s, I suppose, the big 3. But it was very much a focus on blends then. So I think when I moved to Glenmorangie, and then, you know, the past, I suppose, 30 years, as you say, there's definitely been a move to single malts, you know, a real shift in consumer preference, a more focus on quality, I would say, you know, premium focus and more discerning palates. And probably more recently, you know, drinking less but drinking better. So that's probably more of a recent trend. But it means that you know, you have to produce the best, you know, you have to strive for the best, because consumers are becoming, you know, more discerning, looking for quality, exclusivity, more storytelling as well. You know, it's not just about the nose and what you put in the glass. It's like, okay, when you nose a whiskey, what's the story? What, you know, it's like being a bit like being a whiskey whisperer. You're listening to the whiskey. What's it telling you? You know, what can you share with others to enrich that experience that is representative of the character of the whiskey and the terroir, and perhaps other aspects of lifestyle, whether it be music or seasons or whatever comes to mind when you're nosing. So there's a lot more emphasis on storytelling. Obviously distilleries have been expanded, so Glendronach has been expanded, and we still have new stills to put in May, but that is continuing to grow, so that's good. And of course innovation as well has increased. So they're probably the main things. And then also new consumers and new markets. So Korea is doing extremely well. It's blown my mind every time I go to Korea about how many like millennials are buying like 21 and 30-year-old single malt whiskey. It's like really great. It's a really great example of a market that's really growing for single malt. I'm going out to India as well, so that's obviously a huge market opportunity, and emerging markets are growing. And then also probably finally focus on sustainability. So that's when you really get into the distilleries and looking to reduce carbon footprint and renewable energy, all of that, managing water sources, all that kind of thing. So, you know, there's been some stuff in the consumer side and obviously in the marketing side and also in production.
Yeah, and you touched on there the renovations at Glendronach. What can you tell us any more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really, really exciting time for Glendronach because, you know, obviously being founded in 1826, 2026 is the 200th anniversary of the Glendronach. So not only have we got the distillery expansion, we've also got our house that goes back to 1771. Boynes Mill House is being refurbished to be just wonderful new, you know, part of our visitor center experience. So there's going to be, you know, a whole new home place experience, much richer, more layers to it, really from summer as well. And then, you know, we will have celebrations, of course, around the world, as well as people coming to visit the distillery this year, especially once the home place is really ready, which will be around, I think, June, July, summertime. In addition to that, we're bottling in, let me think which month. I think we're bottling in March. Bottling in March 2 new expressions that will clearly say on the packaging in celebration of the 200th anniversary. So that's really exciting.
And I suppose the renovations happening at the same time as that anniversary, excuse me, is really interesting because you're kind of in conversation with the past, that 200 years, but you're laying down something that will probably outlast all of us as well. How is that in terms of both with Glendronach, but in your career in general, where you're balancing the kind of the future? You're always kind of having to plan, I imagine, in well into advance with maturation and different side of things. What's that kind of interplay like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because if you're, you know, a master blender whiskey maker, you are working with the past, the present, and the future. So, you know, we're very lucky at Glendronach, for example, to have whiskey in our warehouses right back to 1968. And depending on what the portfolio is, you know, I have to constantly nurture the past. You know, it's not as if it doesn't need nurturing. You know, and be a guardian of that and check in on the cast and make sure they're fine. And what are they going to be? What are they going to become? Which expression are they going to go into? So that's working with the past. And then obviously being a guardian of quality for the present. And there's, I suppose, 2 main strands to that. So the present is what's being distilled today, ensuring that's, you know, consistent and the character is there and remains, you know, what it's revered for of the still, and also in the present at the same time, making sure that each of the expressions in our product portfolio ranges is, again, nurtured to deliver what the, you know, what the demand is, and, you know, great whiskies that will hopefully be greater demand than forecast. And we've actually seen that recently with the Master's Anthology, which has been great. The demand was twice the forecast, yes.
Wow.
Which was amazing, which was really good news, you know, considering the current climate. So that's the present, so what you do today. And then the bit for the future is, again, looking at what's the wood strategy that we're filling today for new fill. What am I going to re-rack that's going to create new whiskies of tomorrow? And just more the imagination of the whiskey creation part. That's the future looking part, obviously, and getting inspiration from different parts of the world. And, you know, what space can this distillery, each distillery kind of move into? So Glendronach and sherry cask excellence, what can we move into and grow the brand and deliver that's going to, you know, inspire, that's going to drive desire of people to try new expressions as well as still love the present ones. So it's a very rich journey. It's a very rich journey. It's almost timeless in a way, because you're having to work with all of it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fascinating.
You know, and you know, for the future as well, you know, what I'm doing today, you know, there'll be another blender that follows me who's going to be the guardian of the future, you know. So I'm just doing my best for now, doing the best I can, and making sure I do the best for the people that follow, who I'll be able to watch from wherever I am in the world.
Yeah, no, well, that's a kind of a sad but romantic thought. I mean, I always think of, you mentioned the cask going back to 1968. I studied history, and whenever we talk, we had Stephen Rankin on last year talking about one of their very old release they were releasing from 1940, and you're kind of thinking of all the events that are happening then, you know, like 1968, you know, the apex of the kind of counterculture movement and student protests and everything happening around the world, and to think that we'd be discussing it all these years later in the context of whiskey, and, you know, you imagine.
Well, I was born 6 months after the casks that remain from 1968. So I was in the northeast of Scotland. I was cooking at the same time as it was cooking.
well, well, there you go. So
it's always nice to make connections, you know. Always
exactly.
nice to have connections.
So, Rachel, we mentioned the 200 years of Glendronach. It's a really fascinating brand. It's one I've always been a fan of. The other two probably aren't, maybe don't have the same name recognition. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I mean, both fantastic brands. I've had the privilege of visiting both distilleries in the last couple of years. So could you tell those who might not be familiar with Benriach and Glenglassaugh a bit more about them? It's, I mean, particularly, not saying to focus on Glenglassaugh, but Glenglassaugh is particularly in an amazing location on against the North Sea there. They're very picturesque distilleries.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky because they're all very, very unique. I say very, very, just to emphasize the point. You know, Benriach, compared to other Speysides, for example, is, you know, it's a Ben. There's very few Bens. For anyone who knows their whiskies, there's lots of Glens, but very few Bens. And, you know, everything about Benriach is elevated. So it's a North Speyside, you know, it's up on a little raised, kind of, not quite hill, but it's raised land. And, you know, it is renowned for being sweet and fruit forward. You know, I almost describe it like the delicacy of Speyside. It's been around since 1898, and it creates, you know, a spirit that is just, for me, it's like Speyside in a glass more than anything, because of its fruit forward. It's got creamy malt. It's got, there's clarity to it as well, and it's got rhythm. It kind of dances on the tongue, so it's kind of like in motion, And for me, Speyside is all about, being outdoors, being on the move, cycling, running, climbing, whatever. Always in the pursuit of something. And with Benriach, it's like that. Lots of different cask types, experimentation, different styles, distillery styles, but still, in essence, the essence of Speyside. Glenglassaugh, on the other hand, it's right on the beach at Sandend Bay on the Banffshire coast. And it's a beautiful location. There's no other distillery that is as close to surf, I think, probably in the world. I'm going to hazard a guess there. I've not seen or heard of any other distillery that is quite as close to the surf and the sea than Glenglassaugh. And that kind of explains its character, because it's so influenced by the surf, by the sea, and and the minerality of the area. So it's got the most mineral water on the mainland to make the whiskey, and it takes in that North Sea air as well. And in the whiskies that we've created and relaunched Glenglassaugh just in 2023, Sandend was voted best whiskey in the world by a number of places, and is doing really well, and it really represents a coastal elixir, if ever there was one. Tropical, luscious, and with a salinity that's quite like any other whiskey, if not any other spirit I've tried.
Yeah, and would you say that the Glenglassaugh is the most unique distillate? Because you do some peated of that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, Glenglassaugh, I think, really, really stands out from the other nearly 150, whatever it is now, 150 distilleries in Scotland, because it is so distinctive. In the past, previous owners tried to change it because it wasn't very good for blending, because it was so distinctively different from others. And I think, again, never encountered that level, that balance of luscious and oily and salinity. And also with the peat, which goes into the expression called Portsoy, which is the harbour that's just along from Sandend in the northeast of Scotland. It really takes the whiskey into this umami zone like no others. I mean, we've not really made a big thing about this, but I don't think I've ever experienced as much umami in a whiskey as is in Portsoy. But must be because of the soy. There you go. It really has that incredibly unctuous, chewy, savory, almost like fermented soy character, as well as the fruit and the smoke as well. It really is very special. So everything that's coastal in a glass, the essence of the North Sea coast.
And the kind of salinity that you mentioned there, what do you think it gives it that?
Combination of factors. I think it's interesting because tropical fruit, when you taste it, actually has almost this perception of salinity on the palate. I mean, you get the acidity, but it also gives you that slight saltiness as well. So I think there's a combination of the flavors that are created in the biochemistry of fermentation and the wooden washbacks, very close to the sea. Again, the maturation, which, is more humid as well. So whether the sea salt in there is debatable, but it undoubtedly increases the level of the breakdown products from the oak casks, from the malt, that give you more of that fruit and salinity as well on the palate. Maybe from the minerality as well in the air and in the water, and the microflora that, break down many of the compounds into their simplest form, that give you that wonderful fruit and salinity as well. Who knows?
No, marvelous. That's fantastic. And I must say, for anyone listening, as I say, I've visited both distilleries. Benriach is a really interesting. There's some amazing single cask releases and stuff available in the gift center there. I picked up a couple when I was there last, and they're really tremendous drops.
Yeah,
So
well, we
like,
do have more available as well. That's the thing is we do have cask bottlings, and we've selected some for the home place, as you mentioned. And we also have some that, if any customers want to buy a whole cask and bottle it we have a few nuggets there of some very innovative casks as well. But this is all available for the future. I have to keep the balance right between having single casks for cask bottlings, obviously, and to support the core ranges from 10, 12, 16, 21, 25, 30, and we have a 40-year-old as well. So, to keep those going, along with, the distillery exclusives. It's great fun working it all out. Where's everything going to go?
no, marvelous. It sounds like both a blessing and a curse in that when the way you put it there. But if you
No,
ever need any help, I'm sure I
yeah.
can lend you a
Oh
hand.
no, always in need of feedback. Always in need of feedback. All feedback is good.
Marvelous.
All
Well,
feedback is good, but it's a great job, and it's always, just, the imagination has no bounds, has it? So, whenever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. So really excited for things to come, because I'm already working on some exciting new whiskies for not only this year, but 2027, 28, 29, and 2030 in particular. So I've got pipeline I'm working at the moment for the 3 distilleries for the next 5 years. So watch this space.
and is there in that regard, maybe the last question like this before we'll move on. When you're working with these releases, is there at the moment, is there a kind of favorite cast type you're enjoying playing with, or that you're maybe surprised coming out, when you're sampling them?
I think, with Glendronach, for example, the focus has been mostly on PX, because, it's the king of sherry. It works so well with Glendronach's robust character, etc. But I think I introduced experiments with Amontillado since I started, and I think that's the one for Glendronach that I've been like, wow, this is really, really good, because it's like the most complete sherry. So, it just brings together, well, we have a 30-year-old expression, and the combination of PX, Oloroso, and Amontillado was like, wow, this is just so generous and so sumptuous. Just everything was just like, wow, couldn't say anymore. So I've loved being able to really move Glendronach into a wider sherry sphere, if you
Hmm.
wish, if you will, with also Palo Cardado, but still with PX as the dominant cast type. So I've had fun with that. Manthony I also love for Glenglassaugh in particular, so that's one I'm feeling more of, and that's for Sandend. That's probably why it's so good. It's been revered, won top whiskey in the world awards, because that Manthania, that coastal sherry, really brings out with bourbon, all the essence of the North Sea as well. So they're probably the ones the most, but there's lots of experiments on the go. I've got lots of different wine casks, different oaks from around the world for Benriach. So focusing more on that for Benriach, what we can do there to elevate Benriach as well. From new oaks from different mountain ranges. It's a Ben after all. So yeah, there's some fun stuff ahead.
Yeah, I can really see after what we've just discussed with Glenglassaugh how a Manthania would work really well in terms of balancing that minerality and the kind of salinity we were just talking about. And yeah, Palo Cortado, I finished off a 20-something-year-old Palo Cortado single cask over Christmas. That was my Christmas dram. I won't name the brand, but it was exceptional. One of my favorite sherry casks, definitely.
Yeah,
So
exactly. These are the special things because you never can buy that many of them, you know.
yeah.
Oloroso is obviously the biggest. PX is not much of it, and neither Amontillado or Pelo Cortado. So these are the little nuggets, aren't they?
100%. So in terms of, the I suppose the final few questions we ask everyone who comes on, and thank you for your time so far. I suppose the
Yeah.
first one of that is, if you were, we've spoke a lot about the whiskey itself, but if you were to ever do a kind of a different serve or cocktail with any of them, what would your kind of go-to choice be?
Well, Glendronach, I'm going to just put a complete wild card out here, right? Okay. Is I enjoy my Glendronach in the Jancis Robinson wine glass. There you go.
Wow. Yeah.
Have
And
you
it's,
tried it?
no, I
It's
haven't.
mind
No.
blowing. If you have a Glencairn glass and Glendronach 12 and a wine glass, and I've done this with so many people and they've gone, wow, because the Glencairn glass is great. It's great for quality control. Um, and but you still get the alcohol unless you reduce it down to 20%. Whereas in the wine glass, the aromas all go to the center of the glass and the alcohol goes to the rim and it kind of gets trapped. So,
Hmm.
and you've also got a much bigger space for aeration. So it just becomes much more rich and mellow. This is how I enjoy my Glendronach. So there you go.
No, that is.
Bet you didn't know that.
No, I didn't. That's a great answer, and one I will definitely try maybe over the weekend.
You have
That's
to try
interesting. Yeah.
comparison, I mean, for quality control, you can't exactly have like 100 of these things. So, they're also much smaller and great for that purpose. But yeah, I'm surprised nobody's really done this before. And it works. It doesn't work well unless you've got like the best whiskey though,
Hmm.
because it reveals all hidden layers. I would call this revelations of flavor. You
Wow.
get everything coming out. And if it's a great whiskey, boy, it's a bit like wine. It was a great wine, you're going to get everything. And it's going to be so rich and, so rounded. But if you've got one that's not so good, it's not going to work as well. So
No,
that's my
certainly.
recommendation for
That's
Glendronach.
that's that's very interesting, and I suppose it's more like the kind of halfway house between Glencairn and that would maybe be sort of a brandy um, bulb or whatever they call the brandy glasses with a kind of
Yeah,
slightly
the
thicker base.
schnifters or
Yeah.
whatever they are, something like that. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I suppose that's close, but then it's more closed at the top, whereas this
yeah.
is more
Yeah.
open. And this allows for more aeration as well. Obviously, you want to have just that in the glass, but actually for nosing, it's like, wow, the concentration is like nothing else. Really, it's so concentrated flavor. And you can't do that in a smaller glass because you get the alcohol, or you have to add the water and then it dilutes it. So my ideal drinking experience is I want to get the full aroma, the richness, the revelations of flavor, and just take that alcohol into the rim.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It really opens the appreciation, in my opinion, especially for a sherry cask matured
Hmm.
like before Glendronach, just because of I think because of the tannins,
Hmm.
because it's robust, the dark fruit, all these weightier, indulgent, if you will, flavors that just, mellow and, are so rich coming from the glass, no spikes, just perfectly rounded.
No, marvelous. I'll
Anyway.
definitely try that. My only fear would be portion control, but
You have to
but
do portion control, yeah. So, you have to appreciate that this is a moment of appreciation.
yeah. No, that's fantastic. So, coming on to the next question, if you were, let's say, you're nosing a Glendronach in a wine glass like that, what are you listening to? What's your music and background?
Oh gosh. I think it depends on the time of year, kind of what mood I'm in, but um sometimes I'll go very reflective. So if it's like in the dark winter months in autumn, I'm getting more into classical for some reason. So something like Vivaldi's Four Seasons, I think.
Hmm, interesting.
you
That's
know, and especially for Masters Anthology. I definitely did that when I was developing the whiskies for Masters Anthology. I was like, okay, I'm in the summer for Ode to the Valley, listening to that. Ode to the Embers, getting into the autumn sounds, and then Ode to the Dark was, the winter scene, So there was definitely complementary journey of sounds and aromas in creating those. So that's Glendronach. Did you just ask about Glendronach? What about did you want to know
No, I
about the
just
other
meant
two?
in general. I
Oh,
only used
in
Glendronach as an
general.
example because you were in your
Well,
last
I don't
answer.
know.
You were nosing at Glendronach.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, whiskey for me. I mean, obviously it's part of my job, so I appreciate it every day. But it's a mood thing as well, or it's a season thing, or it's every outdoors. Where are you? Who are you with, etc. So, I think it's quite different. Benriach for me, I can never get away from the Electric Light Orchestra, Mr. Blue Sky, because every time I go to almost every time, let's just say, not every time, almost every time I'm in Benriach, it's a blue sky. And because it's that elevated Speyside and that, expanse, yellow Mr. Blue Sky just does it for me.
Mm-hmm.
In my little blue mini that's the same color as the sky.
Brilliant. Well, both.
Yeah. And then Glenglassaugh would be probably something like Chris Riach on the Beach,
Nice.
if you know that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I
Anything beachy.
imagine in my mind it's the Glenglassaugh is a lot kind of windier than I imagine in that.
Windier.
But
Yeah, but Glenglassaugh for me, the taste of Glenglassaugh is summertime because I used to surf as a child, my dad, um, on the beach and in the sea. And whenever I nose it takes me straight to summer. And it's more that kind of summer breeze and then, that warm summer sunset when it's warm up north. Of course, we had a good summer last year.
mhm.
Hopefully this year too. But yeah, it always takes me to summer for some reason. Apart from, well, Portsoy takes me more out into the stormy conditions of the North Sea, being
Yeah.
out in a boat.
Oh
So
well, there's
yeah.
three absolutely fantastic answers. I suppose the next question then is your favorite dram that's not one of your own.
Do you know how tricky that is?
No, I
How
know that's why I'm
difficult
asking.
that, do you know how difficult that is for a master blender to ask who
Well,
works
that's why I'm
for,
here to ask the tough questions, like Jeremy Paxman or something.
oh gosh. And I always try and weasel my way out of it, but saying, well, our whiskies are the best. How could I possibly choose another? Which of course is true, which is of course
Yeah,
true.
well, that's taken for
Yeah.
granted that's why we were saying outside of
Yeah.
that.
Well, I suppose my favorite, I mean, obviously the ones I've made in the past, because they are kind of woven into my soul, it's like my children, they're always with me. And that journey. In terms of something, I suppose, quite different, but also exceptional. I mean, there's nothing quite like 50-plus-year-old single malt, is there? There's
No.
nothing like it. It's like the multitudes of the universe all just in this elixir that you can hardly explain
Mm.
because it's so incredible. So I think a very distinctive moment was probably when I was trying Yamazaki 55 when I was with one of my Japanese colleague blenders at the time. And yeah, it was just truly exceptional. And because it was so exceptional and also quite different from the other malts I tried. So yeah. And most other countries don't have whiskey gets to that age, do they?
No. Yeah.
Scotland, if you're lucky, and Japan, if you're lucky, because of the climate, obviously.
I'll put a word in for
So,
Ireland there though as well. But
yeah, are there many 55-year-olds
no, not
Irish?
55. Well, I'm trying to think if some of the recent Middleton releases have gone up that high. There are a few that are quite old, maybe not quite 55, but older than you might find in other parts of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was very special and that was a very rich experience. So I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's certainly probably the most memorable for being something quite different but very special.
No, that's another fantastic answer. That's one that I've always loved, wished or desired to try, that Yamazaki 55. It looked exceptional. That came out, if I'm remembering rightly, it could be with their 200 anniversary, I think, or around that. I might
Yeah.
be slightly off. But so that's a nice synergy with our discussion around the Glendronach. And so finally, Rachel, your earliest kind of memory of whiskey, either kind of encountering it or drinking it yourself, either or both.
Oh, well, it was around at home. Let's just say my dad has always loved single malt. I think probably from the day I was born, even before it was probably sold as single malt. It was old labels and whatnot, and malts hadn't really started to grow, so his cabinet always had single malts in them. But I didn't really. I suppose I got a little taste. I got a little thimbleful, or got to put my finger in when I was younger. Have a little taste for medicinal purposes in the winter when I was young. But it was really when I was probably closer to 18, to be honest, that I really drank. As I had a tumbler of single malt. It was a tumbler my dad had at the time, I remember. Not the way I would drink it now. It was Hogmanay, and I, actually had the full dram with him. And, that really set me on the journey. I think when I went to university, and obviously I was homesick and everything, and used to buy a miniature actually of different malts, almost every week, maybe not quite every week, but that's all I could afford. Just to kind of, remember that experience, and also to discover a lot more about the range of flavors. So, I became a hobbyist and a bit of a miniature collector when I was was at uni, and then of course that just was lucky to get the job when I did after that.
Marvelous, another fantastic answer, Rachel. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great chatting to you, and hopefully we'll have another conversation down the line.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get a chance to come and visit you. Where are you based, Luke?
Well, I'm work out of Glasgow.